Patch 13.20 has brought forth the single biggest shakeup to the jungle meta that we have seen all season long. Every single role, for that matter, has movement for this patch, which is not something we have seen happen all that often in Season 13. There's so many amazing new picks that have shot up in power for this patch, so if you felt the meta has been stale as of recent, 13.20 solves that. With the help of our challenger players and analyzing the most recent data, we are ready to bring you guys the updated tier list for patch 13.20. But before we get into it, be sure to check out SkillCapped if you want to truly get better at League of Legends. We're the only service that offers a money-back guarantee if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service. We do this because our service really does work, and if it doesn't work for you, you shouldn't pay. Learn more at the end of this video or click the link in the description below. One of the biggest risers up in the top lane for this patch has been Dr. Mundo. Anti-snowball changes have been massive for Mundo and allow him to reach his godly mid-game spike much easier. These scaling champions that have been notoriously weaker throughout the early game are ones who have seen the biggest jump in strength for 13.20, and Mundo is one of them. For now, we'll be moving Mundo from the A tier and into the S tier, but we'll see how things settle throughout the patch, as he could potentially be making a push into OP for 13.21. As noted during our pre-patch tier list, we expected to see more early game reliant top lane picks lose a bit of strength in 13.20, and that has been the case for Renekton. The champ being directly nerfed in 13.19, and now with the anti-snowball changes here in 13.20, means there are much better carry options moving forward. There's just too much reliance on getting ahead with Renekton to win with him consistently, and for solo queue, at least for Diamond and below, it's not the best recipe for success. There's no reason to pick Renekton over the likes of Malphite, Garen, or even Mundo, who we just mentioned. For Renekton's tier list placement, he will be dropped from the S tier and moved into A. Let's take a look at the complete top lane tier list, as our OP picks of the patch are Malphite and Garen. We're dropping Alawi from OP, not necessarily because she's directly become weaker, but because Garen and Malphite are just on another level right now. Garen has become even more OP in 13.20, as the Doran shield buffs are great for him, and he doesn't suffer from the Conqueror or lethal tempo nerfs like many of the other top lane champs do. Phase Rush is still quite underrated on Garen by the general player base, so if you have yet to try it out on him, it's amazing to shore up his main weakness. There are a few other top lane champs who you should put higher priority on in 13.20. Kayle is one of them, as she's loving the anti-snowball patch, being a champion that scales exceptionally well. We moved Nasus up into the S tier for our pre-patch tier list, and that was the correct decision, as he's been seeing much more success this patch. With these scaling top lane picks coming back into meta, mastering wave control can really amplify your carry potential on them, so our complete course on wave control is a great resource for you. In regards to the K'Sante mini rework, the changes have turned out quite power neutral. On the analytical front, K'Sante has not seen a shift in win rate at all, which is actually not a bad thing. Shifting power on his kit away from the burst and giving him more tank traits should be positive for the long run and not make the champion so frustrating to play against. It's likely Riot issues some buffs to K'Sante in the coming patches, so until then, we would advise to stay away from him for solo queue. A few of the best top lane bans of the patch include Garen, Aatrox, and Malphite. Malphite, Nasus, and Garen are really the only 3 champs you need to climb at a low elo from the top lane. We told you guys to watch out for Rammus in our pre-patch tier list, and he's even exceeded our expectations for 13.20. The champ is looking absolutely broken right now, as the changes that Riot made to pet DPS were huge for Rammus. They increased the armor scaling on pet damage by 10%, which is perfect for Rammus as he rushes Thornmail. The shield on Moss Stomper jungle item was also increased, and even though the tenacity and slow resist have been removed, it seems like it's been a neutral to positive change at best. If you want some free elo right now from the jungle, then Rammus is the pick, as he's moving into the jungle OP tier. Now, with the likes of Rammus gaining power off the back of the pet DPS changes, lots of AD junglers have lost power because of them. Riot completely removed the bonus AD scaling from your jungle companion, which in turn is hurting Kha'Zix extremely hard. Gustwalker being nerfed and Duskblade being hit as well are 2 more factors to why Ka has seen a sharp decline in win rate for 13.20. This is one of the biggest single patch adjustments we have made in a while, as Ka is dropping from being one of the best junglers in 13.19 to one of the worst in 13.20, moving from S into B tier. A champion that has been in and out of the jungle meta over the past few years is Morgana, and she's back in for 13.20. If you guys are unaware, Riot snuck in a buff to Morgana's W, increasing her damage to monsters. Definitely more of a low elo pick here, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, as Morg has a very easy to execute clear and is always a threat due to her bind with Q. For now, we will be placing Morgana in the jungle B tier as an average pickup. So now let's take a look at the jungle meta as a whole and discuss the major shifts for this patch. OP tier is going to consist of 2 champions, being Briar and Rammus. One major trend for this patch has been the decline of AD junglers who run Gustwalker. We already noted how the pet DPS nerfs and Gustwalker nerfs have affected Kha'Zix, but they put a dent in the power of many more junglers as well. Hecarim, Bel'Veth, Master Yi, Rengar, and Talon have all fallen off quite hard this patch, and all find a spot in the jungle B tier. Tanks have definitely been the biggest winners of the patch, as we already went into detail about Rammus, but Zac, Maokai, Sejuani, and Amumu have all seen a spike in power for 13.20. Even though the health on jungle camps have been increased for your second clear, it looks like this has not had a significant impact on level 6 reliant junglers. Karthus, Nocturne, Evelynn, and Fiddle are all performing extremely well. With a lot of the AD junglers simply losing power, it indirectly makes these AP carries and tanks much higher priority now. It's not all AD junglers that have fallen off though. Graves is actually seeing a lot of success in 13.20 as he's not an AD champ who has been reliant on Gustwalker. Graves runs Scorch Claw, and with the buffs to Ghostblade, he's looking extremely powerful right now. There's also a strategy emerging this patch where you grab an early Doran's Blade on your first base with Graves and a lot of other AD junglers. The buffs to Doran's Blade make it an even better early game purchase, and if you really want to take control of the early game as a jungler, don't sleep on it. With Graves in a great spot now, our Master in Minutes course for the champ can really fast track your ability to succeed if you're looking to pick him up. Graves, Jarvan, and Briar are definitely the most optimal AD jungle carries that you should prioritize. Allocating your ban toward one of Briar, Graves, or Rammus is going to be good value in 13.20. To climb low elo the fastest, these scaling junglers get much better this patch, so Shyvana and Lilia are great, while Rammus is just way too broken to pass up on. Aurelion Sol and Kassadin were two mid lane champs we told you guys to watch out for during the pre-patch tier list, and we couldn't have been more correct with that prediction. The anti-snowball changes have been massive for these two, as they're both incredibly strong scaling champs. It's really as simple as that, and as a result of those changes, both champions will find a spot in the mid lane OP tier. So that is the major movement in the mid lane tier list for this patch, as OP tier will now consist of Vex, Kassadin, and Aurelion Sol. One champ we may have underrated for mid lane during the pre-patch tier list was Ziggs. We were so focused on him becoming an OP pick for bot lane that we forgot to mention him for mid. Mid lane Ziggs has been rather mediocre for a while, but it seems like the buffs this patch have finally brought him back into relevancy. It's kind of crazy to even say this just because the champ has been so weak for mid lane for so long, but Ziggs will be moving into the mid lane S tier for 13.20. A few of the best mid lane bans of the patch are Kassadin, Neferi, and Vex. Just spam Aurelion Sol if you want free elo in the lower ranks right now, but Malz and Annie are great options as well. Exceeding our initial expectations and making a big push back into the ADC meta for this patch is Jinx. We had moved Jinx up into the ADC A tier for the pre-patch tier list, but a push into OP tier is warranted with how impactful the changes have turned out. As a champion who excels in those mid to late game skirmishes, anti-snowball changes were amazing for Jinx. A slower early game where you can scale into the mid game is going to favor Jinx, as there are few ADCs with the same kind of mid game impact as her. It's really the passive buff to where the attack speed stacks on kills that's allowing Jinx to absolutely take over mid game fights. This is the one thing we underestimated for pre-patch when rating Jinx. Give Jinx that reset and she just mows over everyone. Some of the clips that are surfacing with late game Jinx in action are just disgusting right now, and you should look to abuse her while you can. Moving on to the ADC tier list, we have a couple of adjustments for mid-patch. For the first time in many months, Ashe will no longer be placed in the ADC OP tier. The champion loses power this patch due to the anti-snowball changes, as her lane bully potential, which is a part of what makes her so strong, becomes less effective. Scaling champs are in meta right now, and Vayne is feasting as a result. Ziggs' buff to Q has been even more massive for him down in the bot lane than it has for mid, so it should really be no surprise to see him in the OP tier. One important thing to note that affects every single ADC for this patch is that Doran's Blade will be the best starting item in the majority of games. In recent patches, Cull and Longsword start were pretty popular, but you're just at such a disadvantage now if you take one of those items and the enemy starts with Doran's. Unless you're in a super passive matchup where you're extremely confident you'll be able to survive early on, you should be starting Doran's Blade. The stats don't lie either, as for example in 13.19, Jinx had a 48.5% win rate running Doran's Blade and a 48.6% win rate with Cull. Now in 13.20, there's a bigger spread in win rate between the items, with Doran's users at 51% and Cull users at 50%. Of course, this spike in win rate for both items are due to the Jinx buffs, but it's the difference in win rate that just goes to show that the Doran's buffs have been impactful. A few of the best bot lane bans of the patch are Kai'Sa, Vayne, and Ezreal. Ziggs, Misfortune, and Ashe are the most optimal low elo picks. We were correct with a lot of our pre-patch predictions for 13.20, but one we admittedly got wrong was Melio. Even though the buffs for Melio were more centered around the mid to late game power of the champ, that's where he really thrives, and especially with the anti-snowball changes this patch, those buffs become even more impactful. He got 20 more shielding at max rank, which is actually quite big because it is the spell you max out first on the champion. The passive change that Melio received doesn't have any direct numbers attached to it, so it was hard to get a super good read on how impactful it would be. As a result, we were kind of just going off the E change alone without fully factoring in the passive buff, but now that the Melio buffs have been live for a few days, it's clear they are providing him way more strength. With more scaling ADCs back in meta, especially the Jinx, it's another more hidden factor that gives Melio way more power moving forward. Deservingly so, we'll be shifting Melio up the tier list, as he now stands as one of the best enchanters for solo queue, finding a spot in the S tier. So other than Melio making a move back into meta, the supporting role is aligned identical to where we had it for pre-patch. OP tier is locked down by 3 champions, as we have Zyra, Blitzcrank, and Senna leading the way. We told you guys in our pre-patch tier list that we were really really high on Senna to become one of the best supports for 13.20, and it's played out like that to a T. Indirect changes have led to over a 1% spike in Senna's overall win rate, which is actually quite big considering she was already a great support in 13.19. Ghostblade buffs are actually pretty sleeper for Senna as well, and we had the build featured in our OP builds video for 13.20. If you're looking for that pure carry from the support role, then there's nobody better than Senna right now. Enchanters are back in business as well, with Sona, Janna, Soraka, and Melio all loving the anti-snowball additions that were introduced. Melee supports like Leona, Nautilus, and Rel have seen a bit of a decline as more health on starting items means less early game kill threat. Nautilus's win rate has actually fallen a full percentage point, which is quite substantial considering it was just indirect changes and no direct nerfs to the champion. A couple of the best bans from the support role for this patch are Senna, Blitzcrank, and Rakan. Heimerdinger, Zyra, and Blitz are 3 of the most optimal low elo carries. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about SkillCapped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent challenger players into Elo Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. So there you have it guys, a complete update on the solo queue tier list as we reach the midway point of 13.20. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you back soon.